All right, we've reached asana. I have a lot to say about asana, but Patanjali doesn't. Patanjali doesn't dedicate a whole lot of sutras to asana. In all of the 200 sutras, almost 200 sutras, there's 3 that talk about asana. Now, of course, in context, when this was written, asana meant posture or seat, really, truly. So to take your seat, to take your posture was all about meditation and how we sit for meditation. Asana did not mean that we were performing these postures or shapes in our body or doing any type of choreographed movement, which is really what we define asana as today in the West. But it was to take your seat. So what does Patanjali have to say about taking your seat? 246. The posture you choose for meditation should be steady and comfortable. Sthira Sukha. These are very commonly translated and talked about sutras of some of the most common in the yoga world. And we look at this concept of sthira and sukha, this steadiness and this comfort. Also, you can use the term ease here to define how we should show up when we're taking our seat for meditation. It can also define how we can show up when we are performing the postures or shapes in our yoga asana classes today in yoga studios. So let's think about that for a moment. What does it mean to be steady in a balancing posture in a yoga class? What does it mean to be steady in Warrior 2? What does it mean to be steady in handstand or headstand or plank? How do we find that steadiness? Where does that steadiness come from? There is no right or wrong answer here, but those are interesting questions to ask as teachers of our students while we're teaching. And this concept or principle of steadiness is a foundational one for our entire practice, our asana posture practice, and also our seated meditation practice, because we can ask those same questions when we take a seat to meditate. Where is this steadiness in our body? Can we connect with this sense of steadiness when we're sitting down to meditate? Can we find steadiness in the breath? Can we find steadiness in the mind? And equally, where is the ease? And this one might even be more important when it comes to asana posture, meditation, breathing, because we can't just have only steadiness and effort. We also have to have the balance. We have to have the ease and the comfort. There's that paradox again. We have the 2 ends of the spectrum, and we're trying to bring ourselves into center and find a place where we can inhabit a space that we can inhabit that involves both the steadiness and the effort, but also the ease and the comfort. And this isn't easy for people to find, but it is the ultimate seeking, I think, for many of us in our posture practice. How do we show up in this posture each and every day and connect with both the sense of steadiness, but also this profound sense of ease and relaxation? And then when we can find it in a posture in a yoga asana class, when we can find it in our breath or in our meditation practice, we have to ask ourselves, where can I find this steadiness in my life, in my daily routines, in the way that I'm showing up for myself and in the way I'm showing up for others? Where am I finding the ease? And especially in our Western world, that effort or steadiness, you can translate it either way. There's a lot of effort in our Western world and not as much steadiness, perhaps. Or you can feel really steady and effortful, but have no ease. So there's a lot of ways that this spectrum can be imbalanced. And these questions are meant to help bring us back into balance. Sutra 247. So how do we find this steadiness? Well, Patanjali tells us. You can find steadiness in your posture by relaxing the effort required to sustain it. Now that's almost... that's ironic. That's what? Like, how do we find steadiness by relaxing the effort required to sustain it? So many of us would think we find steadiness by doing something more, by strengthening the muscles. But no, Patanjali is saying we have to relax the effort. Yes, there's still going to be effort to keep us up in an actual posture, plank, for example. There's got to be effort because you've got to have those core muscles to help support you. But Patanjali is asking us to relax the effort just enough so that we can still sustain it safely, but also be able to breathe into it, to find comfort. Then the other piece here is that ease, that comfort. How do you find that? Patanjali says you can find comfort and ease in your posture by focusing on the infinite. What does this mean? So think about when you're focusing your gaze. Going back to this idea of drishti as yoga teachers, a tool that we use in our asana classes to help our students find balance. We ask them to focus on one thing. So try this for a moment. Focus on one thing only. Really focus your gaze. It could be a spot on the wall or a picture or even something right in front of you on the screen. Just make sure that it's not moving so that your eyes don't get distracted at all. So don't focus on me. But if you focus your eyes on one thing and you try to maintain that focus for longer and longer periods of time, that requires intense discipline. And there's a lot of effort in that. There's a lot of effort in not getting distracted by all of the things that you could focus your gaze on around you. Maybe somebody walks into the room, or you have a pet walking around, or you have a child that you need to be watching. So there's a lot of things that our eyes can shift around to look at in our life. And so it requires a lot of effort and a lot of discipline for us to remain really focused. And I use this as an example to show you how intense and effortful really focused gaze can be. Now, when you open up your eyes so that you can also see the periphery, that requires almost a softening of your eyes, an actual softening of the physiology of the body to enable you to see all around you. You cannot maintain that intensity, that specificity of the focus. And so this is the softening that Patanjali is talking about when he asks us to find comfort and ease in our posture, so that it is not so specific to, say, one muscle, but more encompassing of our entire being. He's inviting our entire being into a particular experience of the posture. So again, let's take plank. When you are in plank and you're trying to hold plank and all of your focus is on your core muscles trying to hold you up, yes, they have to be working to hold you up. But if you also open up your awareness to thinking about your face and your jaw and your hands and your arms and your shoulders and your legs and your feet, and you allow your entire body to be a part of that posture, you can no longer maintain that same intensity in your core muscles. Of course, they still have to be working, but our awareness has to broaden to encompass and invite all of us into the posture. And that brings about a different kind of strength, one that is not so singularly focused, but at the same time allows us to open up to the possibility of softness, of unity, of universal consciousness. Allowing that to be part of our experience suddenly absolutely changes our experience of the posture, of being in our body, of being in our mind. And if we can start to soften our perspective in life, our belief systems, our relationships, in a way that invites all of us, all of our emotions, all of our feelings, everything in our body, it's challenging, but it's also freeing and empowering. And it almost puts you in this state of awe. At least for me, it almost gets us to that place where we are connecting to true self-consciousness. And there are no words to describe that. It's simply a feeling and experience. So that's really what Patanjali is asking us to cultivate in our asana, which today means in our posture practice, but could also mean in your seated meditation practice. And you can see how cultivating this attitude in your seat to prepare you for meditation would put you into a mindset, an open mind that allows you to receive meditation. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a video that's coming up. And in Sutra 248, Patanjali says, once you perfect your posture, you will be free, there it is, from suffering and no longer disturbed by the pairs of opposites. So we're talking about that spectrum, the opposites. On one side, you've got the strength or the effort or the steadiness. On the other side, you have the ease or the comfort. And when we find that middle, we're no longer pulled by one or the other. That's those pairs of opposites. And then we're no longer disturbed by those pairs of opposites, which exist in the world around us, Prakriti. And instead, we connect with the center, with the true self, and that is where we find freedom from suffering. We then can take these same ideas and apply it to our life. We free ourselves from the emotions, the opposite emotions. We free ourselves from opposite feelings. We can take this and lay it upon any situation in our life and find freedom by coming back to center. That is what we should be looking for in our asana practice, according to Patanjali. So here are our principles: steadiness, ease, balance, and freedom. How, as teachers, can we share these ideas with our students? And to be quite honest with you, when you start to incorporate these ideas and principles into your teaching, as asana teachers, it will totally transform how you teach your classes and how your students receive your classes. Because it's not just about getting strong. It's not just about performing these shapes or perfecting these postures. It's about finding balance and getting centered. And that totally changes how you relate to individual postures in your life and in your practice. Once we find that center in our posture, in our seat, in our practice, in our life, then we are ready to move on to the next step, pranayama. And that is what we will talk about in the next video.